Windows. I don't even use this shit. Let's see how to get. I'm trying to get another window up so I could. What is this? Okay. So I guess I could use that screen like on. Let me see how this look. All right, so I guess that only works with fucking YouTube. I guess. I mean, uh, like, you know what I'm saying? Because right now you can't see my video, but I'm streaming that through YouTube. But if I minimize this, I mean not YouTube, through my Xbox. So I'm still kind of new to this shit, man. But yeah, I'm finna do a reaction on Dirk's case, man. Let's see. Let's see what we see on there. So let's see the latest news on what's going on with Lil Durk. And then we're gonna go into this video from Law and Crime Network and see what they talking about. It's a month ago. That's the latest video they got. I'm trying to see something recent. Well, This from Chicago Sun Times, so let's see what they saying about dessert. It says Lil Durk wants murder for hire case tossed after death threats to judge. What the hell? What the fuck is this? Go. All these damn pop-ups. Then it says, look, then they tag FBG Duck. They say Lil Durk wants murder for hire case tossed after death threats to judge. Prosecutors go unreported. Then they say lawyers for Chicago rap superstar contend that secretive investigations and closed door meetings about the threats have irreparably compromised the structural integrity of these proceedings. Gotta close this. Gotta close that. It say Lil Durk's lawyers on Thursday called for the dismissal of his murder for hire case in Los Angeles after learning that a judge and prosecutor received death threats that weren't disclosed to the Chicago superstar's legal team for 7 months. Lil Durk, whose real name is Dirk Banks, was initially charged in the conspiracy in October of 2024. That was last year. The same day, 5 other men were indicted for the killing of the cousin of rival rapper Quando Rondo in LA in August of 22. It says in an explosive court filing, Banks' lawyers and the attorneys for 3 of his co-defendants hold the secretive investigations and closed-door meetings about the threats have irreparably compromised the structural integrity of these proceedings. It says government officials knew in February that U.S. Magistrate Judge Patricia Donahue had received 4 voicemails threatening her life and courthouse personnel as she oversaw the early phases of the case. The assistant U.S. attorney, I'm going to slaughter your name, Ian Yaniello, the lead prosecutor, got similar threats in April, days before seeking a superseding indictment. It say the violent case-specific death threats invoke the name of Banks and one of his co-defendants, DeAndre Wilson. The filing states every judge in the Central District of California was warned while a secret investigation was conducted, but the defendants weren't told until the 1st of October. Earlier this week, prosecutors alleged that the threats were made by Banks' supporters and said the claims of a cover-up were frivolous. In pushing to have an anonymous jury impaneled, the prosecutors argued that Banks' allegedly vindictive gang. Who wrote this shit? The prosecutors argued that Banks' allegedly vindictive gang has also threatened and intimidated suspected government witnesses. This nigga, man, and that Banks obstructed an investigation into his clandestine, unmonitored jail communications. Clandestine. Donahue got 4 voicemails from a male caller on the 22nd that contained explicit death threats and invoked acts of mass destruction, accompanied by sounds mimicking gunfire, the defense attorney said. The caller told Donahue to do the right thing and free Banks and Wilson. Says if they get life, I'm going to burn this expletive down. I'm talking about the world. I'm going to burn it to the ground, the caller allegedly said. Dirk got the followers, crazy followers, man. This shit is crazy. Let's see. It says an FBI agent arranged an interview with the suspected caller and reported back to prosecutors in the U.S. Marshals Service. Let's see. That's a long ass article, shit. It says on April 28th, another person called and threatened to kill him in other courthouse theft while urging him to free Banks. Court records showed 3 days later, the grand jury returned a second superseding indictment with a new charge of stalking resulting in death. Damn. Niggas doing the most. During a hearing on May 8th, Donahue denied Banks' petition to be released on bail because she deemed him a flight risk and a danger to the community. Yeah, the boy out of there, man. Let me see. That was really the end. So let's see when this was written first. There ain't no date. That's what be making me leery about it. But this Chicago Sun-Times. So, but I can't see when the article. November 13th, 2025. That was this month, y'all. All right, so now let's see and listen to what they're talking about.
Lil Durk's federal case just hit a whole new level of chaos. So authorities are now requesting an anonymous jury after alleged threats against a judge and prosecutor. Prosecutors say the rapper tried to destroy an Apple Watch in jail to cover his tracks, and he's now being accused of allegedly taking out hits on his own O-Block associates. With his trial currently set for January, the state...
That's the crazy part. Bro, like you ain't acting right. I'm gonna put a hit on you. Get your ass out the way. You know what I'm saying? You bullshit. Fuck it. That's crazy.
Couldn't be higher. We are going to break down all the latest updates in this case with a former federal prosecutor. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, the Lil Durk case just took another wild turn, maybe series of turns is the best way to explain it. So federal prosecutors are now saying that the Chicago rapper, A, ordered hits on his own O-Block associates for failing to retaliate after the death of a fellow artist, King Von. They are pushing for an anonymous jury, claiming that threats have already been made against both the judge and a prosecutor. And you add in the fact that Durk was allegedly caught with an Apple Watch in jail and tried to destroy it. So this case is now spiraling, right? What is going on here? How do we break it down? How did we get here? We're going to rewind for a second before we break down the new updates. So, Lil Durk, whose real name is Durk Derek Banks, is still being held in federal detention in Los Angeles following his October 2024 arrest. Prosecutors claim that Durk orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot back in 2022, sending members of his crew from Chicago to LA to target rapper Quando Rondo. That this was a form of retaliation, they say, for the 2020 killing of Durk's close friend, King Von. In the shooting that followed, though, Quando wasn't the one who died. It was actually his cousin, Savia Robinson, who was killed in what prosecutors are calling this ambush-style attack at a gas station. Now, Durk isn't accused of pulling the trigger himself. He is accused of ordering the hit, allegedly funding it and directing it. That is what landed him a stack of federal charges, including conspiracy, firearm offenses, murder for hire resulting in death. His defense has been very aggressive, though. One of the biggest moments in this case came earlier this year when Lil Durk's legal team filed a motion to dismiss the federal indictment entirely, or at the very least, force prosecutors to turn over the grand jury materials that led to the indictment. Remember, grand jury materials are usually secret. But in that filing, Durk's attorneys argued that prosecutors misled the grand jury by presenting false and misleading evidence. Specifically, they mentioned one of Durk's songs, Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy, which they claim was wrongly used to connect him to the 2022 murder for hire plot. The thing is, the argument they make, he had actually written the lyrics that prosecutors were citing months before the killing. The defense wrote in that filing, the only open question is how such patently false information came to be within the grand jury's purview to begin with. One answer is that the prosecutors who prepared and presented the government's evidence knew that the evidence was false. Another is that the prosecutor who presented the evidence did not know it to be false, but the witness who conveyed it did. And the third answer is that the evidence was obtained and presented with reckless disregard for patent falsity. And really, the big picture here is that Dirk's team is bringing up a really important argument early on, that rap lyrics shouldn't be used as evidence of violence. This is a common theme we've.
Yeah, I thought that's how that went. Like, I thought we wasn't using lyrics in trials, but shit, you could clearly see they try to use that shit. And the cold thing about it is, them people ain't finna, man, they don't give a damn. They finna fry. They finna try to fry 'em. They finna try. Shit, I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a pretty stiff. I mean, shit lining up, man. Allegedly, we're gonna keep saying allegedly, man. Everything is alleged, man, until the judge bang the gavel, man. But that, I just hate that this whole fucking thing is like really crazy though. His whole situation is crazy. I ain't even gonna say nothing. We just gonna keep watching.
Talked about in a lot of trials, right? Federal prosecutors, they ended up filing a new superseding, amended indictment, deleted the contested lyrics, brought an end to that motion, that issue. Now we got to talk about what's happening today. All right, I know this is a 180, but I gotta tell you about this new sponsor we have on Sidebar. It is a brand called Wild Grain. This is the first bake from frozen subscription box for artisanal breads, seasonal pastries, fresh pastas, and Wild Grain's products. They bake in 25 minutes or less. Now, that doesn't mean that they're skimping on quality, okay? Because unlike store-bought items, like everything you see out there,
skip that.
One to face federal charges for ordering a hit, ordering an assassination, right? Even if they didn't pull the trigger themselves. Is it common?
Jesse, always good being on. It's usually not common. Usually they'll throw that in with the actual murder or some sort of RICO charge. But here, the feds apparently believe that Little Dirk is the one who's the shot caller, even though he's not pulling the trigger. We do see these murder for hire cases stateside more, but the feds are really interested in this case for some reason, maybe because of who Little Dirk is.
Do you think that there's strong evidence that he directed this in some way, was funding it in some way, was the mastermind behind it in some way?
I think there's.
See, and that's the thing, man. A lot of motherfuckers don't understand. People don't be giving a fuck about what you do, but once you start getting brazen with that shit, like doing that shit broad daylight around kids and all that, boy, they gonna get you up out of there. You gonna get out of there. Ain't no amount of money that could, you know what I'm saying, save you. Shit, look at Casanova 2 times. Shit, and I don't think that. Well, I think they was linked to some. We're gonna have to. I'm gonna do a reaction on his shit, like AR Ab, Casanova, people who lost on them type of charges. Shit, Casanova got like a quarter, for real. Shit, I'm gonna have to check and see what AR Ab got, but like them people not playing with that shit. Them people not playing with that shit. Let me see something. Hold up real quick. Yeah, them people, man, say. Let's see.
evidence. Is it a lock? Not necessarily. A lot of these federal cases, as you know, by the time they go to the grand jury and get an indictment, Jesse, it's a done deal, right? I mean, it's just a matter of whether they're going to plead or be convicted at trial. But here, it's a little bit more attenuated. Obviously, we'll see what evidence comes out. Look, you're relying on cooperator testimony. You and I have talked about it a lot, right? Those are people that are often criminals. You got to corroborate that. Now, they have text messages, but some of them are pretty cryptic. And, you know, to the extent that Little Dirk's credit card was used for ski masks, hotels, and so forth, that's certainly enough. But for the conspiracy, for the solicitation, you usually need something more than, just some credit card charges.
And it leads into something the defense is doing, where they're challenging this indictment. My understanding is saying it's impermissibly vague. What does that mean to you? Is that a common defense? Does it usually work?
Jesse, it's not a common defense at all. And usually it doesn't work because really the remedy is for the prosecution to cure and be more specific in the indictment. When you're talking about a conspiracy, when you're talking about solicitation, you really need to identify those overt acts and furtherance of the conspiracy, the evidence of the solicitation for the murder for hire. And in this particular case, I think the defense's theory really is the best defense is a good offense. They're trying to file these motions, not because they necessarily think the indictment's actually going to be dismissed, but to put the prosecution on its heels a bit.
And the pendulum swinging, right? Because now let's talk about what the feds are doing. This is the new allegations. This is what I wanted to bring you on for. So the feds have allegedly quietly introduced this new explosive claim into Dirk's legal case, that he didn't just order a hit on Quando Rondo, that he also put out hits on members of his own O-Block crew, who apparently failed to retaliate after King Von's 2020 death. This was a friend of his. That's according to reporting from Hot New Hip Hop, The Source. According to those reports, federal prosecutors, they plan to present testimony from a witness who claims that Dirk personally gave those orders to O-Block associates. Now, this new theory, it frames this case even more broadly. So not just a revenge plot, but kind of like this possible internal purge, an effort to maintain control, demand loyalty, punish dissent within his own inner circle. Now, that being said, none of these additional claims have yet led to new formal charges against him. But Nima, let's talk about it. Can you explain what it means legally if prosecutors allege that Dirk ordered hits on his own associates, even if no new charges have been filed as of yet?
So Jesse, there's a couple reasons why you want to do this. Sometimes the feds will pile on to try to gain leverage and to force some sort of plea. But in this particular case, it's probably to try to dirty him up. If you remember, the 80s movies where the villain turns on his own crew, really, that's something that jurors are not going to like. Now, look, I'm not saying this is substantiated, but it may be part of the bigger story here. This wasn't just a hit on Rondo, right? With Robinson being the innocent target. This was, like you said, a purge. Dirk was upset because his own crew didn't avenge the Von death. So he wanted to kill even members of his own inner circle. Again, not saying that the prosecution can prove it, but if they can, I don't think jurors are going to like Little Dirk at all.
And by the way, just to be clear, Rondo has not been, charged or connected to the death of Von, but it is interesting what this theory is. I do want to make it clear that what is coming out right now is prosecutors seem to say they plan to present witness testimony that Dirk gave these orders. If that's the case, how credible are they, especially if they're testifying in this trial in federal court?
Yeah, I'm kind of shaking my head, and this is me personally, Jesse. And like I prosecuted, cartels, organized crime. I really don't like to rely exclusively on the testimony of cooperators, right? Look, they're always going to get torn up on cross-examination that they have an axe to grind, they're disgruntled, they're lying to save themselves. It's fine if you have corroborating testimony, right? So maybe they have text messages again. The messages seem a little bit cryptic to me. So you got to be really careful when you're just relying on cooperator testimony. You got to buttress it with something more. And the last thing you want to do in these types of cases, and we've seen them, like YSL, when you overcharge, it adds confusion, the case drags out, and you end up getting nothing as well. So hopefully the prosecution is going to bring some evidence here to substantiate what they're alleging.
If they don't add new charges, and I'll talk about what those could be in a second, if they don't add new charges, this could be part of the case, though? This technically could be part of the overall case against Dirk, the federal case, what he's currently facing?
It could, right? It could be the 404B, right? Part of the motive, the plan, so that could come in.
Sentencing, maybe?
Sentencing, of course, we know all that relevant conduct comes in, right? We saw that in the Diddy case. So I think a judge would allow it in because it is relevant to this scheme. Again, the defense has to be provided notice, obviously any discovery related to it, but it's going to come in. Look, at the end of the day, you're talking about a federal murder for hire case, right? It can carry, we know it carries a potential life sentence, but even a potential death sentence. Now, obviously, the feds haven't filed notice of intent to seek the death penalty. So it's not going to add anything in terms of the potential exposure, but it can certainly bring more bad facts into the case if they're substantiated.
And support their case. Okay, let's say they decide to bring new charges with respect to this. Is that something you expect to see, and what could those charges be?
It'd probably be, conspiracy or attempted murder, right? And, we're talking about a January trial date, so it's pretty late in the game. I don't know if the judge would allow it. If the judge did, the defense may ask for a continuance, and I think the judge should probably grant it, right? If you're adding additional counts 3 months before your trial, probably a little bit late, in my opinion, to keep that trial date. Again, obviously, it's the defendant's right to a speedy trial. If Dirk's team wants to keep that date, they'll move forward. But it may be a reason to kick this out.
But not a different trial, not a different case, not a separate case. Like they wouldn't bring a separate indictment, had nothing to do with Quando Rondo, separate indictment regarding him allegedly taking out hits on his own people. That's not something you expect.
No, not at all. It would be part and parcel of the same case.
Okay. Now I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about the second motion to dismiss by the defense. So on October 6th, Lil Durk's legal team filed a second motion to dismiss the federal indictment, and they argued once again that the case against him is too vague to be fair. So per reporting from Hot New Hip Hop, Durk's attorney, Drew Findling, lays out the problem. That while the indictment claims that co-conspirators carried out acts at the direction of Durk, flying to LA, tracking and stalking Quando Rondo, attempting to kill him by gunfire, procuring firearms and other equipment, that it fails to provide specifics about what Durk himself allegedly did or said. As Findling writes, while the indictment alleges that the co-conspirators carried out various acts at the direction of Mr. Banks, flying to Los Angeles, tracking, stalking, and attempting to kill TB by gunfire, this is Quando Rondo, and procuring the firearms and equipment used to do so, it fails to give any specifics. When, where, how, and to whom did Mr. Banks give these alleged directions? To ensure the basic fairness of this trial, the defense is entitled to know. He adds, what the indictment fails to tell us are the very things that the defense is entitled to know, the operative facts underlying the government's theories of Mr. Banks' guilt. There is no allegation here that Mr. Banks physically participated in the stalking and shooting at issue. And Durk's legal team has also called the indictment, as we mentioned, impermissibly vague, demanding clarification on the government's allegations. Quote, it leaves the defense to guess as to the government's theory of guilt, and it leaves the government free to change that theory as its cooperators' stories morph over time to meet the demands of a conviction. Nima, do they have a point? How much do prosecutors actually need to lay out for the defense? This is, again,